Philistines have defeated Israel. And they thought that because they defeated Israel, their God was greater. Their God has caused them to have success in battle, has delivered them and freed them, so their God must be stronger. And that was the belief in that day. When armies go out to battle, the one with the stronger God is the one who wins, and they won, so their God must be stronger. But with that said, they still believed in a multitude of gods, in a multiplicity of gods. They still believe that, but just because our God beat that God doesn't mean that that God is not a God. So what we'll do is we'll simply collect gods. We'll collect gods. And as we collect gods, we'll take that God and make it subservient to our God. So since Dagon is our God and he helped us to win the battle, we'll take the Hebrews' God and we'll put him in the holy place, in their worst place of worship, but we'll put him underneath our God. We'll put him underneath our God. So it wasn't that we're not going to worship the Hebrews' God. It's just that our God is over him, and he's going to be worshiped underneath him. Now, with that said, we have to understand that the Philistines were not the first ones to do that. See, part of the problem is that the Israelites had been doing that all along. What's happening here is this isn't the first time that that's happened, because Israel has been worshiping other gods all along. Israel has been worshiping other gods all along. And they've been worshiping other gods above Yahweh. And that's been the problem. That's why they got defeated in battle. It wasn't because the God of the Israelites wasn't stronger. It was the fact that they weren't worshiping him. And now he's giving them an opportunity to see that they must submit to him. They must submit to him. But you have to understand that when gods fall, communities crumble. When gods fall, communities crumble. When you no longer worship the one true God, but you put other gods in their place, and those gods don't meet the needs of the community begins to break down. The community begins to fall apart. Even in our own homes, when you're going to church and you're worshiping God, everything may not be wonderful, but everything is manageable. You have to understand, everything may not be perfect, but everything is manageable. There's a degree of peace there that's not there when God is not on the throne. But we get to a place where we get married and we have children and we seek to prosper in life and things are going well. And in the midst of all of that, we humble ourselves before God and we seek God and we're faithful to church and we're faithful to these things. And then after everything gets to be okay, we begin to worship all of our possessions and our status and our image and what people think about us. And before, when I was coming up, people would understand that I was on the come up, so I might have looked a little disheveled. But now that I got myself together and I have some means or what have you, and now I have to maintain that reputation. And well, sometimes God just doesn't fit into that. So sometimes now that I have the children, my prayer life kind of goes by the wayside because I have all of these responsibilities and I have to wash them up and I have to feed them and I have to care for them and I have to provide for them. I have to work extra hours. So maybe when I get home and it's time to pray, it's hard to pray after you've gotten home from work and you've taken care of everything and I just want to lay down and go to sleep. And in the morning, I'll pray in the morning. And maybe I don't pray in the morning because, well, I slept a little in. And so I got to get up and I have to get to church. And my schedule is jam-packed. And God begins to take the back seat to work and to family. And after all, I begin to alter my religion and say, God is the head of my life, but he wants me to love my family. And church activities go kind of by the wayside. And my children need to be well-adjusted in the community. So I need to have them in extracurricular activities, and well, the church is small and it doesn't have those things going on, or the church is large and it still doesn't have those things going on. So my life gets inundated with all of these things. And God has answered all of my prayers because he's given me all of these things. And I find myself in the place of Hophni and Phinehas. And when your God is your belly, when your God is your desires, when your God is material things, you become full of yourself. Now it's all about you. And you're high on, you can just go to the store and pick up nice new things. You're high on the fact that you could take a vacation. You're high on the fact that you got your degree. You're high on the fact that you got this nice little person on your arm. You're high on the fact of life, and you're strutting your stuff. And worshiping your God gets to be kind of heavy. And you have to prop your God up by buying more stuff and taking more vacations and getting more degrees and getting more certifications and getting more things to impress people, because you're constantly propping your God up. But as you're propping your God up, your family's falling apart. You're falling apart. You're frustrated. You're stressed out. You're anxiety stricken. You focus on your children because, after all, you've had these children, and you dress them in the finest of clothing because you want to impress people. So I can't just go down there to the dollar store and pick up something. You know, I'm well past being, I don't have to go to Walmart anymore. So, and I'm not going to go to the discount stores. I'm going to go and get the finest of threads for my children so that I can impress people when my little bad kids run around. At least they look good. But see, the thing is, when our God is our children, we fail to further their faith. Because what has happened in the world today is, because we began to worship children, we no longer, see, you don't discipline your God. You don't do it. Matter of fact, you make excuses for your God. You don't discipline your God. And we don't discipline our children because we've begun to worship our children, and now we just kind of allow them to do whatever they want to do. And if anyone else tries to discipline our children, we will fight people over our God. Our children go to school and they won't sit down, they won't listen, they won't do their homework. They'll lie to us about the fact that they didn't have homework, and then we go there to stand before the teacher, and why did you give them, oh, it's 9-week test and we're going tomorrow to see grades. I don't know about Meridian, but I know our school. And I'm not one of those people that works. Look, that's an F, not a B. Now, my children have never done that, but my brother sure did. I used to think it was so funny. He had B's on his report card, and my parents bought it for a minute. Yeah, they believed it. He would, today you put the grades on the computer. Back then we had a little card you brought home. And he could make that F into a B, and he was all right. I was like, that boy ain't even been to class. How he get a B? He'd get off the bus and he'd go around the side, and I'd say, hey, Matthew ain't getting no B. That was an F. But anyway, but today you get an F on your report card, and parents going up there yelling at the teacher. What you yelling at the teacher for? Your God got an F. Why are you mad at the teacher? It wasn't that the teacher failed to teach. It was that the child failed to pay attention. I mean, because chances are, if you show up, you're going to get at least a D. You know, they're just going to give you that, you know. But so the thing is, we worship our children, and our children we don't pass on our faith. There's no sense of discipline. Honoring God. And when you honor God, you honor and respect other people. And when you honor and respect other people, you do what's needed and necessary to do what's needed and necessary. But then also, communities fail when your God is your good luck charm. You harm your community. Because, see, Eli didn't honor God. He honored his sons, and he let them do whatever they wanted to do. And now Israel fails in battle, and then now they want to take the Ark of the Covenant and put it before them in battle so they can win. They want to use things of God as a good luck charm. We want to put a cross around our neck to protect us. We want to have, this little prayer before we go in there so it can prevail for us. And we want to use God as a good luck charm. Instead of humbling ourselves before God, instead of submitting ourselves before God, we want to use him as a good luck charm. God doesn't work that way. That God can't stand. You see, when your God is made by you, it must bow before God. Just like when they put the Ark of the Covenant in the temple with Dagon, the statue, the idol, the fixture, all by itself had to bow before God. And at some point in time, the religion that you make for yourself is going to have to bow before God. At some point in time, we're going to have to worship the God of all creation and stop making gods of our creation. Stop worshiping gods of our creation. Stop bowing down to the world system, the great American dream, materialism, education, whatever it is. Stop bowing down to the world philosophy and bow down to the Word of God. Because at the end of the day, no God can stand in the presence of God. No God can stand in the presence of God. Whatever you have fixed up in your life to help you to sleep at night is not going to work unless you have peace with God. We must have peace with God. And when you have peace with God, you're not trying so hard to have peace with men. Many of us are trying so hard to have peace with our children and peace with our neighbor and peace with the public and peace with people in church because we don't have peace with God. When you have peace with God, you're comfortable in the skin that you're in. When you have peace with God, He doesn't have to do what you say. You submit to what He says. And when you pray to God and things don't work out the way you want them to work out, He's still God. Like Job said, though you slay me, yet will I trust in you. Yet will I trust in you. You take my home, you take my possessions, you take my kids, you take my health, but I'm still going to worship you. I'm not going to curse you and die. I'm not going to give up on my faith. I know that my Redeemer lives, and one day I'll see Him. You have that faith when you have peace with God. When you have peace with God, you're not clinging to this life with every fiber of your being. You're aching and you're paining to get to the next life to be with Him. As Paul said, while I'm in this flesh, I'll worship Him, but I'd much rather be out of this flesh and to be in His presence. But I can't do that. But as long as I'm here, I'm going to be as close to Him as I can, and I'm going to do that through serving Him and serving others, not serving myself. Because God will not share His glory. And you have to understand His glory. You have to understand what's going on in this text as we look at chapters 3, 4, and now we're at chapter 5. And it's really about the glory of God. And the glory of God, if you were to break that down in the plain language of layman's terms, it's weight. It's weight. Heaviness. And you have to see that Hophni and Phinehas, they were heavy with their own glory as they were stealing from the sacrifice. That they're heavy, and they were giving this meat to their father, and their father was so heavy with the glory that was supposed to be going to God, the sacrifice, he fell over in his chair and broke his neck because he was heavy. And the thing about this thing is, this weight of God's glory causes you to bow down. When you understand the glory of God, the weight that's attached to that, that's why you see in Scripture people fall on their face when they're in God's presence. Because of His glory, the weight of His glory, it presses you down. You can't stand in God's presence. The weight of God's glory will cause your God to break. How do I get freed from these things? Paul says that in Romans chapter 7, chapter 8. He says, the things I want to do, I don't do. The things I don't want to do, those things I keep doing. Who's going to deliver me from this body of bondage, this sin? I thank God for Jesus. His glory will deliver me, because the glory of God, when I experience the glory of God, the fullness of the Holy Spirit indwelling me, baptizing me, filling me, overshadowing me, the glory of God breaks that sin, that habit, that bondage, that fear, that doubt, that anxiety. Listen, we can take medicine, and there's nothing wrong with doing that, but at the end of the day, it's understanding and seeing the person in the presence of God. That breaks the bondage. That brings the peace. When my God is no longer fear of what might happen, but my God is the one who makes all things happen. That changes everything. And you have to understand, as we look at this text, the glory of God is not restricted to a location, because they had this belief that, well, now we're in this area, and all of a sudden, in Ashad, in the temple of Dagon, God is powerful, and he's more powerful than our God, so let's get him out of there. Let's move him to the next neighborhood, move him over to Gaza, move him over to Gath, move him over to Ashdod, and let's move him around. So if we move him around, maybe the gods over there are stronger, but wherever they took him, he showed himself strong. And I want you to understand this. Israel was trying to defeat the Philistines to prove that their God was strong, but they couldn't fight for God. You can't fight for God. God fights for himself. You can't defend God. And so many of us are trying to defend God before other people in our flesh. And that's why we're losing the battle in our testimony. Because instead of testifying about God and who he is, we're testifying about how blessed I am because of who I am. We're testifying about our own strength instead of the strength that we have in him. God is saying, I can testify about my own self. And that's what he does in this text. I don't need you, Israel, to defend me. I can defend myself. All by myself in their own temple, I'm showing myself strong. All by myself in their own communities, I'm showing myself strong. I'm defeating more of them than by myself than any of you could have ever defeated. All by himself. The power and the presence of God can be seen. And that's when the last thing, as we in chapter 6, as they hook the Ark of the Covenant, we got to get rid of this thing. We got to move this thing out of here. This thing is causing us problems. We got people sick and we got people dying. We got people uncomfortable, got all these tumors and all this stuff going on. We got to get this thing out of here. We got to move this Christian out of here. We got to move this church out of here. We got to move this Christianity out of here. We got to move this thing out. Well, what are we going to do? Well, this is what we're going to do. I'm not sure if this thing is the problem or not. It might be the problem, it might not be the problem, but we're going to try this thing and see what's going on. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some cows that just had some calves. We're going to take some mama cows that like to nurse their little baby calves, and we're going to separate them. Oh yeah, we're going to separate mama from her babies. You follow me? We're going to separate mama from her babies, and you don't separate mama from her babies. Because the little baby's over there, hey! Well, that's a sheep. Moo. I don't know what a baby cow sounds like. Okay, that's what they say. Okay. I was getting there. Griffin, I might not need to get cows. I might need to stay with the goats. I would get some cows anyway, but then they can take care of their own calves. But the little calves are going to be over there saying whatever the calves say. I need to get that. Remember that little thing in school where you used to turn it and it tell you what the thing sounds? I need to go find one of those. Come back. Okay, but he's going to separate the cows and the calves. And the calves are going to be screaming for mama. And mama's going to want to go back to the calves. So they say, listen, this ain't going to work. And not only did they do that, but they also took cows that have never been hitched together before. Never. So listen, if they've never been hitched before, they don't know how to pull anything. They're going to pull stuff all over the place. So not only did they do one, they put two of them together. They have never pulled a thing, and they separated them from the calves. They said, we creating a good mess right here. So it ain't no way possible they're going to pull this ark down there, back down to Israel. It's just not going to happen. And if it does happen, it must be God. It must be God. So they hooked up these cows, they separated from the calves, and they tell them, head on out. And you know what the cows did? They stood there, they looked towards Israel, and they eased on down the road. Eased on down the road. It said they didn't look to the right or to the left. They must not have been Christian, because we would have looked to the right and to the left. They didn't look to the right or the left. They set themselves. And listen, that's the lesson that we ought to have. when we humble ourselves, when God is present and the Spirit of God is there, he changes you. He transforms your nature. The cow's nature would have been to go back home to feed their calves. Their nature would have been to say, I ain't pulling nothing. I'm going my own way. But he changed their nature. When God gets a hold of us, he changes our nature. He sets our eyes like a flint, and we go straight towards our Savior. That's what they did. They went straight towards the place they were supposed to be. And it said they went singing. Yeah. They went singing. I was going to try to ease on down the road with the move, but that wasn't working for me. But they went on down the road mooing. And they went straight to where they needed to go. That's God. That's God. And people wonder, what is salvation? Salvation is when God changes your nature and you head towards him, not looking to the right or the left. You don't care what anybody is saying. You don't care whatever's going on around you. You leave your people, your place, your stuff, your things, the things that you hold dear. You leave that to go to where God is. That's what salvation is all about. I leave everything, and I can't help myself because he changed my nature. And he gets down there, and the Israelites see it, and they recognize, and they worship, and they worship. Except for a few silly folk. A few silly folk got down there, and they began to worship, and they said, now what's in this box anyway? And God dealt with them. You don't qualify to look in this box. Nobody told you to ever open this box. You don't peek into the glory of God. You just bow under the weight of it. You don't peek into the glory of God. You just bow under the weight of it. So many of us want to know God and understand God in such a way that we can control God. Is he really real? What is he really doing? Listen, you better recognize and bow. Recognize and bow. Don't try to usurp God's authority. Bow under the weight of his glory. And when you do that, God fights your battles for you. God fights your battles for you. So many of us are still seated on the thrones of our lives. So many of us are still trying to fight our own battles. So many of us are still trying to do our own thing. So many of us still have gods erected that we make more important than God. Our children, our finances, our jobs, our titles, our relationships, our friendships. More important than God. And we want to do life our way because I feel like this is what's best for me. God is what's best for you. Do what he says and you'll have peace and you'll have joy. So I asked the question, can your God stand? No, your God can't stand before God unless he is God. And then he stands